This is Rooted by the River, an SRC parenting podcast. None of us have parenting figured out, but I'm so glad you're coming on this journey, a journey to grow as parents while we raise and disciple our children. Rooted by the River is here to equip your family to root deep in the living waters of Jesus and his love. I'm John Homas, the family pastor at Spanish River Church. I'm here with Alyssa Hanna today, who is a counselor, as well as a mother of three, and has been participating in the class I've been teaching on Wednesday nights on boundaries. So Alyssa, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your counseling work that you've done. What's your specialty?
No, I work with children of all ages, everywhere from 3 to young adults. So I've worked with parenting. I've worked on teenagers. Teenagers are like my sweet spot.
Okay.
I really enjoy working with them.
You might be getting some phone calls after
I'm sure.
saying
Yeah, no, it's been such a joy working with them, and it's nice because you can work with the parents, but you really work on connecting with those kids.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So my guess is in your counseling work, the idea of boundaries wasn't new to you before taking the class. You'd been familiar with that.
Yes, definitely. And there's a lot of different things we've applied just from the mental health aspect, where especially with play therapy, and it carries over into adulthood too, or parenting and teenagers and all ages really. But there's a neat approach called the ACT model. So
Okay.
it helps you to implement boundaries, but also connecting with the child. And so ACT stands for like acknowledging the feeling, communicating the boundary, and then targeting an alternative or a different choice. So it helps you outline, okay, let me validate their feelings, what they're experiencing right then and there, but also communicating, hey, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And then giving them an alternative choice.
Yeah. Good. So even before we launch into that, let's define boundaries.
Yeah.
So the Cloud and Townsend curriculum, Henry Cloud and John Townsend have written this curriculum called Boundaries: When to Say Yes and How to Say No. And it's been a very helpful curriculum for a lot of people. They have books that apply those concepts to different areas of life, like marriage and parenting and teens. But they start with this simple definition that a boundary is a property line. It defines what is in your realm and what's outside of your realm, what you're responsible for versus what someone else is responsible for. It's about ownership. Yeah. So sometimes people hear boundaries and they say, well, boundaries can be an excuse to not love other people. And it's like, well, okay, you can use anything to get out of as an excuse to not love other people. But boundaries are really about this idea of stewarding what's yours. You cannot do everything. You only have 24 hours in the day. You only have a certain amount of energy. You've got to use that to the best of your ability to glorify God. And boundaries help you learn what to say yes to and what to say no to. Yeah.
I really liked the property line idea, because
Yeah.
it's your fence. You're establishing that fence to protect yourself and others.
Yeah.
And like, you're not necessarily responsible for the other person's feelings.
Yeah.
I thought that was a piece stuck out, because you might feel guilty of establishing a boundary with whoever, like whether it's your child or another adult. And you might feel guilty about, I don't want to hurt their feelings, so maybe I won't say no, or maybe I won't put this boundary up. But you're only in charge of your own feelings and emotions, and you don't have control over how they react to that.
So often we go through life and we kind of imagine what the other person's reaction might be, and then we do what we do based on our imagination of what their response would be. And that's number one no with boundaries. It's like you can't imagine what someone else is thinking. You've got to be honest and open, and you are not responsible for someone else's emotions. That doesn't give you permission to be a jerk.
Yeah.
But it also does give you permission to be honest and true and let people know when they're stepping over the fence into your property. And so all this really comes from this passage in Galatians 6, where Galatians 6 talks about the difference where sometimes in life we have these humongous boulders that we have to carry. And we can't carry them by ourselves. And that's at the point where we say, what's needed here is sacrificial love. If someone's going through something that they cannot handle on their own, as a Christian, my responsibility is to care for them. At the same time, right in that passage in Galatians 6, Paul writes that each person has to carry their own burden, be responsible for themselves. And that word that he uses is more like a backpack. There's things that are, daily loads that every person has to carry. Every person has to be responsible for themselves. They have to get a job. They have to, figure out where they're going to live, things like that. And one of the things that Claude and Townsend say is there's a difference between being responsible to someone and being responsible for them. Mm-hmm. So I can't control your behavior. Therefore, I'm not responsible for what you do. But as Christians, we're responsible to each other. We're called to love each other. Mm-hmm. And so we think about even our kids and helping them draw appropriate boundary lines with their emotions, with their attitudes, and with their behaviors. So taking responsibility for those are theirs, mm-hmm. right? How does that come up in therapy?
Well, I think a lot of it is taking the ownership of, okay, what just happened? What's your take in, or what's your part in that situation or dynamic? What can you do to help communicate those boundaries or solve an issue or solve maybe there's a conflict. Mm-hmm. So what can you do to mend that relationship or mend that issue?
Yeah. Tell me one more time about the ACT model. Yeah. Let's bring that back up because I'm curious to explore
that. So
the
ACT is acknowledging the feeling, mm-hmm. communicating the limits, mm-hmm. and then targeting an alternative.
Gotcha.
Or targeting a different choice.
What would that look like in real life?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of an example. Well, something that comes up personally in our household is keeping our hands to ourselves. Okay. So say
you have little children.
Yes, 5 and under. And so maybe one of them might hit the other out of frustration. So I could implement this model and say, hey, you're frustrated, you're mad. Hands are not for hitting. Mm-hmm. You could do this instead and give them an alternative. You can say, I'm frustrated, or I need space, or hey, I was playing with that. You can give them the words that they may not have, mm-hmm. or you can give them an alternative solution because they're little. And even if they're not little, they're learning.
Right.
And so you can give them the tools to learn how to establish those boundaries in safe ways.
Yeah. Because it's so crucial, right, not to deny how they're feeling. It's not, you can't just say, don't be angry or don't be frustrated. Mm-hmm. That doesn't help. Mm-mm. You want to actually help them acknowledge what they're feeling and then take responsibility to channel that in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. And that's what the ACT model does.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think with that, we've talked a little bit in class about yes and no parenting. Even as I've talked with the parents, we all have like a tendency, sometimes even within a couple, there's a yes parent. Mm-hmm. Like mom and dad, I know if I go to the yes parent, I'm going to get the answer I want. And there tends to be a no parent. What we want to do as parents is have our answer be the same. So my wife and I come across as we have one answer for this, right?
Yes.
How do you think about yes and no's with kids?
Sometimes I'll ask my kids, did you already ask Daddy about this? Mm-hmm. And they'll be like, yes. Okay, what did he say? Yeah. What was his answer?
Yeah.
Okay, mine's the same. Yeah. Because we are a unit. And so maybe I wouldn't initially say the same answer, but if he's already said yes or no, okay, I'm going to agree and say that's my answer too. And other times, okay, you haven't asked him. All right, let's talk about what's up. And then, so I definitely do agree about the being a united front, because the kids pick up on it and know who's more the lax parent or who's not. Yeah. Being more of a yes parent. I liked that concept of the book in your seminar, where not automatically going to the no as your answer, but rephrasing something in a way, hey, let's clean up your room first, and then let's do that. Instead of, no, you can't do that.
Right.
Because you can rephrase it where it's still not, you don't have to create a power struggle. Because if you say no all the time, you're creating this tension and she's just going to say no. Why even ask? So let me go do it, without asking. Or causing a power conflict
Right.
or a control issue.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're rephrasing things in a way where you're still the parent, but you're able to, hey, for example, if you're at the store and your kid wants to buy something, hey, Mom, can I buy this? You know what? I like that. That's really cool. I'm excited that you're excited about that toy. Let's add that to your list. So we're not going to buy that today, but we'll add it to your special list.
Right.
And
Because when they say, can I buy it, what they really mean is, will you buy it for me?
yes, yes. And then if you say yes all the time, they're going to constantly be asking or expect a toy every time you go somewhere. And that's not always reasonable or realistic.
Yeah. I remember a couple of things they said in the book was, first of all, when it comes to the yes and no, try and figure out what the desire is below the question. So for instance, they've just taken a bath and they say, I want to go jump in the pool. And you can say no, and then that's it. Or you can say, hey, are you looking for something fun to do? Okay, how about we play a board game as something fun to do? And then you've just gotten out of having to do the bath the second time, but you've also said yes to their desire. And then you mentioned this, they call that the conditional yes, which is, can I watch TV? Yes, absolutely. Let's clean our room first, and then you can watch TV. You're training them in a couple ways. One is you're helping them take on responsibility first. But then secondly, one of the things why it's important to say yes is your child's just not trying to bother you with the requests. They're actually exploring God's world. And you want to be the chief champion of them exploring God's world and their place in it. And if they hear no, if they automatically know that you're going to say no all the time, that isn't just a momentary thing. That actually forms how they view their place in the world. And we want to do our best to set appropriate boundaries, which are, saying yes as much as we can. Now, obviously, if the child says, can I run in the street? No, you may not do that now or
There's
ever.
a time and place for that, no. and saying yes and being able to rephrase things where it's not automatically no, no, no. Your no or stop has more power and strength to it. Whereas if you're like, no, stop. Well, if they hear no 100 times a day, like it's just gonna go on deaf ears.
Right.
They're not gonna hear what you're saying.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing we talked about in class was the trying to grow personally as a parent out of not just reactionary parenting with the yes and the no, but also our philosophy of parenting. Because it can often be shaped by our past. For instance, if we had very strict parents, we might say, well, I'm not going to do that. That wasn't any fun. But then we go and we become permissive parents, which can be the exact opposite. The pendulum swings the other way.
Right.
And trying to grow personally and say, it's not about me reacting to my past. Rather, it's what's best for my child as they're sitting in front of me right now. Yeah. How did that hit you?
I really enjoyed that piece because it's so applicable to everybody, where a lot of times you'll see that full swing spectrum of super rigid or super permissive. And it's a balance. Like parenting and boundaries need to be a balance. And every kid is different and unique. And so they might have to look different and unique for every child in the household. And I think, too, keeping that in mind, where if you don't want to be so lax, like if your household was rigid, where there's no rules or limits, because that's going to cause more issues for them, too. Like it's a balance.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. We talked, I kind of made this up, and it was a joke, but I called this the Ferris Bueller principle. I don't know if this movie was probably before your time, but there's this quote from the movie Ferris Bueller, which came out in the 80s, and he said, life comes at you fast. If you don't slow down and look around once in a while, you might miss it. And that's kind of the premise for the whole movie. But I think it's helpful in parenting to slow down. What's my tendency to react in the moment? And then let me step back out of that. Ask for God's help just for the next hour to be present and think through what's best for my child. Yeah. What's been some of your takeaways maybe that you've had conversations with your husband about from the boundaries class?
Oh, man. No, it's...
And I don't want to pry,
yeah.
but I'm just...
No, it's been good. I feel like it's really reshaped my perspective on the day-to-day boundaries. Like, it's helped me reframe it. And we're putting these boundaries, creating these future disciples. And, you know, we want to create and be intentional about these boundaries because we're shaping the future. We're shaping a future human that's going about the day interacting with people.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to just blindly parent. Like, it needs to be intentional. And we fail at it every day.
Right.
But I think it's been really helpful in reshaping that or reminding me about it, where, you know, God's given us these children to help mold into Christ-loving, Christ-fearing individuals. And so being able to talk out boundaries. Hey, why am I not allowed to do this? Why did you say no to this? Or why did you say yes to this? We did this to protect you, or we did this to, you know, Jesus loves us. Like, he calls us to shape you in this way. You're not always going to be the fun parent, but being intentional.
Right. And having that long view. I love what you said. You know, a phrase I think often about with parenting is, I want to raise a fully formed disciple of Jesus. And I don't say a perfect disciple of Jesus, but to raise a child to be an adult who knows how to live in line with the gospel. They know how to say that they're wrong. They know how to respect other people. They know how to love because they know Jesus loves them. And I think as we think about our own children and thinking the long view, I really like that. Not just in the moment, if you're saying yes or no, but the path that you're setting your child on with how you say yes or no. Is this helping them develop as a human being? Is this helping them grow and mature so that when they're an adult, they're a mature adult? One thing that my dad says, who's a marriage and family therapist, is he says, as you help your child grow, and even as you say yes or no to them, there's three things that you can think of. Are you helping your child become marriable, or I'm not sure if you say marriable or marriageable, but able to be a good spouse? Secondly, employable. Are you helping your child be a good worker and able to follow rules, show up on time, and do a good job? And then third, serviceable to Jesus, to be part of the body of Christ and not think that they're the center of the world, but think that Jesus is, and work together as a team to accomplish kingdom goals. So marriable, employable, serviceable to Christ.
I love the idea of, like, putting those into play, of being intentional with your parenting and how and when to say yes or no, and not just blindly going into it, where you're raising these little individuals to be those things, to be meritable, to be employable, and to be serviceable. And I think that's a lot of pressure on us, but thankfully we have Jesus that can help us do this.
Yeah.
But no, I think those are all great. Your future and daughter-in-law or son-in-law.
Son-in-law,
thank you.
Right.
Because you've been able to grow and help them learn these skills of day-to-day life, or how to be a good partner, or how to be a good father or mother.
Right. Well, I was just thinking, like, all of a sudden, you know, you have a child that is not doing their chore, and you're like, oh, again. But all of a sudden, it's infused with meaning, because it's like, am I training them to be a good spouse who takes responsibility around the house and shares the load? Am I teaching them to follow through, which a boss in the future will be thankful for? Or am I teaching them that their desires aren't the center of their world, rather it's Jesus' desires? And so I think that's helpful, because it can inspire in the moment to go, this isn't just about this one little battle. This is about someone who's maturing and growing, and I've got to think 20 years down the line.
The big picture.
The big picture, yeah. One of the other things my dad has said was thinking through another lens and how they're maturing and developing. This is a little bit more psychological, but I think it's helpful. So the first thing, as you're parenting and saying yes and saying no, is to think about, am I helping my child be interdependent or codependent? Interdependent is they're their own self. They're comfortable in their skin, but they also know how to be loyal and rely on others.
Mm-hmm.
In codependent, maybe do you have a good definition for that, coming from a counseling background?
Yeah, I think being enmeshed or too enmeshed with another and not being able to find autonomy, which is not being able to differentiate yourself from others, whether it's peer groups or another person in the family or whatnot, but not being overly dependent on someone, whatever that could look like.
Yeah.
And I think us as parents, we could try to teach them those things from an early age, where maybe it's fostering more independence and trying to do things on themselves, on their own. And I think, I don't know, I'm just thinking of my little ones putting their shoes on. Like, they'll ask for help automatically, but like, hold on. We've been over this. I think you know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so, like, trying to step back to help foster that independence and growth.
Yeah.
And, like, something as little as putting your shoes on.
Right.
But it grows into, it's building blocks. You know,
Yeah.
it stacks onto each other. And I think keeping that in mind of, like, you know, it starts with one thing at a time. But we got to teach them these things. They don't just learn them.
Right.
Or if they're having conflicts at school or with others, then, hey, let's talk about that. How can we build upon this of teaching them the skills they need to deal with the problem effectively and safely, but not being overly codependent where they just let people walk all over them.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't want to lose them as a friend, so I'm not going to say no.
Right.
Wait, hold on. Let's step back and, like, help them walk through that in a different way.
Yeah. I was trying to think of examples for this, as we're going to be, at the time of the recording, we're going to be going over this coming Wednesday. But I was thinking about the difference between, you know, a teenage girl that wants you to buy one outfit so they can match their friend in going to a party, versus a teenage girl who says, I want to buy all my outfits to match, you know, my friend. There's a difference between, maybe like it's something fun, it's interdependence versus a codependency. Another thing I wrote down was the difference between a child who's able to identify and respond to their own emotions and decide what they want, versus a child who doesn't pay attention to their own emotions, only to the feelings of others. That would be a sign that that child needs help in that area. They need help learning. They don't have to adjust to everyone else's feelings.
Helping them distinguish that. Or if you're noticing signs, you know, like being able to, hey, I noticed that you're starting to act more and more like this person. Like, let's, you know, you're made in God's image. You're perfect. Like how he made you. Let's be more yourself.
Yeah.
And you don't have to start acting or blending in more like this person to be accepted. Like, I think it starts in small little things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it gets tricky as they get older. But
right.
I think teaching them that from the start.
That's good. That's good. The second thing in this second set of lenses would be self-direction versus cultural direction. Paul writes in Romans 12:1-2, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. And then he says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect. So that idea of saying yes and saying no to your child in a way that helps them develop an internal value system, where they're not just saying yes or no based on the pressures of the culture or their peer group, but they're actually able to discern themselves what is good and true and beautiful, because they've developed their own value system. How has that played out even as you've counseled teenagers?
No, yeah, that's a good population to work with, because they are very into what culture is teaching and what society's trends are. And so I think helping them differentiate or look through a different lens, I guess, is that how God intended things, or is that how, you know, Jesus hoped for life to look like? Like, just because X, Y, and Z is doing this doesn't mean Jesus had that in your plan. Yeah. And so it's okay to go against societal trends,
right?
if it goes against your moral values.
Yeah.
And so you have to, I think teaching them that and building that foundation so that they can discern that.
Yeah.
But why? Why not? Why do I not do that?
Right.
And then maybe point them back to the Bible and Scripture and God's Word so that they can apply that or see for themselves, not just blindly following you, because they're not going to be able to discern that as they get older if they don't have that spiritual lens to look through.
Well, there's a sense where you can help them connect to the heart and will of Jesus, but I think there's also a sense, even thinking through self-direction versus cultural direction, where part of it is helping them see the consequences of some of the things the culture says is normal. So even as we watch TV, we usually don't see the consequences of, for instance, sexual promiscuity on TV. It's like it looks a certain way, it happens a certain way, there's no consequences. And that's just one example. But I think even as I was talking with a parent a while back, they were telling me something that their child was wrestling through, and I said, hey, why don't you let him talk out what would happen if he did follow through with this? Like let him, they call this in the recovery community, like play the tape, like run it out and see what happens. And I think, so if I do this, this person will respond this way. If that person responds this way, then I'll get in trouble for this. If I get in trouble for this, then I'm grounded for 2 weeks. If I'm grounded for 2 weeks, then I don't get to do this and this and this. If I don't get, like play the tape. But I think even as we think about like helping them be directed by self, part of that is like thinking about the consequences of actions and not looking at the culture and saying, well, the culture says there are no consequences, but wait a minute. If I run the tape, there is consequences. So self-direction versus cultural direction.
Yeah, definitely.
The last one is assume responsibility versus feeling entitled. It's interesting. You gave this example before we hit record about like your child asking to help. Tell about that.
Yeah, so it comes up often, but they'll ask the help with something, and I'm like, oh no. But then I could sometimes they'll express this themselves, but other times I can tell, oh, they're hurt by not being able to help. Okay, hold on. What do you want to help with? Okay, let's figure out how we can do that. Because there's like that deep need, they want to connect with you, but then they also want to do something for someone else, whether it's their sister or brother or a friend. And so, it might be an inconvenience of your time,
right?
But the value of that inner need of whatever that desire would be, or that, I think you said it earlier, like a godly value.
Yeah.
Is that how you said it?
Yeah.
Where that's been put on their heart to help someone. Like, I mean, something that happens in our house, they'll ask to help with dishes. Water gets everywhere. But they light up. They enjoy it. They really enjoy that time. And I just, there's water on the floor, but this is special.
Yeah.
And they're learning how to do a skill in the house.
Yeah.
They're learning how to be responsible with the water, how to be kind to one another while doing it. And there's a lot of things that can be taught and learned through that, all just because they wanted to help mommy.
Yeah. Well, I love that you gave a positive example, because as we think about assuming responsibility versus feeling entitled, my tendency would, first of all, be to think about saying no to them feeling entitled. So, no, you're not entitled to have a temper tantrum. No, you're not entitled to have a bad attitude that ruins the family moment. That was my first thought. But what you're saying is, but there's actually a yes to assuming responsibility that might cost you a little bit, but actually affirms a desire that they have. That's actually all of these. It's interdependence. It's self-direction. They have this desire that they feel is good, and you want to affirm that. And then it's assuming responsibility. And though it takes more of you, you're actually thinking long-term about affirming a child who wants to do the dishes, which I can tell you that desire does not carry on into the teenagers. But I love that. That's so good. Yeah. Well, thanks for being on today, Alyssa. This has been really helpful. Thank you so much for journeying with us on season 1. As we conclude season 1, know that we're getting ready for season 2 coming sometime in 2026. But also, as we think about the next couple months, we may have some bonus episodes that pop up. So be sure to subscribe or like, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to Rooted by the River, the family podcast of Spanish River Church. If you're watching on YouTube, leave your takeaway from this episode in the comment section. If you found the episode helpful, send to a friend or leave a review, which is a great way to help others find this podcast. Feel free to send your questions in to rootedbytheriver@SpanishRiver.com. Thanks again for listening.